Hello, everyone. We have such a fun episode today. We're talking about the hit movie Inside Out 2. This movie really struck a chord with me. Definitely watch it if you haven't. I kind of think it's more for adults than kids, but that's besides the point. And to talk about all these inside feelings, I brought in an expert. I'm joined by Chelsea Clifton, a licensed family therapist and mother of two. We get into a lot of great stuff around helping kids deal with anxiety and how to not identify so much with your emotions. Really something everyone can learn from, not just kids. My name's Anthony Francis. You're listening to the Successful Working Parents podcast, where normally we interview working parents, but sometimes we have fun switching it up, talking about parenting dynamics in movies. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Anyway, on to the show. Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents podcast. Today, we are talking about the very recent hit, Inside Out 2. My guest today is Chelsea Clifton. Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we'd love to hear like a quick intro on you if you'd like to share.
Yeah, so Chelsea Clifton, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in California, and I specialize in working with parents and helping them to kind of understand what is happening with them when there's pure chaos happening outside of them, and just working with the family system of how we can manage in the moment. And so that way we are creating healthy dynamics.
Awesome. Well, this is a super relevant movie for us to talk about today, Inside Out 2. I just have to say right away, I hadn't seen this movie before, and it was awesome. I really liked it a lot. And I was sitting there, I was watching, I was like, why is this not a bigger deal? But it is. It was actually like the highest grossing animated film of all time, I learned from after beating out The Lion King. So it is a big deal. Like I'm not like tapped into that world yet. My daughter's only 16 months, so she's not watching like the new movies that come out yet. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty blown away by it. What's your relationship like with this movie?
I mean, I loved the first Inside Out. It was a lot of how when I worked with kids specifically, I would have that be a homework assignment of, you guys need to sit down as a family and watch this because it explains so well what's happening in the brain, and it helps to just give kind of that visual context. And so the moment Inside Out 2 came, I mean, we were there opening day. So brought my kids with me, and it's just such a great tool to like be able to not only show kids what's happening, but for parents to understand this is what's happening in their kids, along with like that's what's happening within themselves as well.
Okay, so that's one question I really wanted to ask you at the beginning here is, who is this movie really for? Because you have a 7 and a 3-year-old. Mm-hmm. Does your 7-year-old really get it?
100%. 100%. And it actually has been so helpful for her to see, because we actually talk about like, okay, when your sadness comes out, what does your sadness need? Does it need a hug? Does it need a snack? What does it need right now that like I can help you with?
I mean, because I found it very helpful, but I'm 37, so I was like, I don't know how like 8-year-old me would have connected to this, but it's good to hear that it sounds like it's universally appreciated.
Yeah, and I think especially too when I work with families, younger kids, it's a big thing that we do is we externalize. So it's, I don't have the problem, the anxiety monster, the angry monster has it. So this movie kind of showed that like you're separate from your emotions, and like you can actually take care of those needs. And so, and being able, the movie does a good job of showing like what a need looks like.
Yeah. And again, I think a useful tool as an adult as well.
Oh yeah.
Trying not to identify with your emotions and making them external. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of themes here. A big part of this is anxiety. There's a lot of stuff about trying to, kid wanting to fit in, and things about being hard on yourself. And also, to your point, how adults can keep in mind that they have these same experiences that their kids are having. So just let's just dive in. So the first thing this movie does is it builds on the first one, and it introduces this concept of memories creating beliefs, and the beliefs creating your sense of self, which again, what a concept to introduce to a 7-year-old or to any child. Again, I was like blown away that they were going there, and like things that I'm just sort of figured out in adulthood.
Yeah. And I think that's what like is so nice, because like right as adults right now, it's like we're just discovering this. And I'm like, wow, like what a good solid foundation to give kids now and to give teenagers now of like, this is your sense of self. And here's how, these core memories are made, and how I kind of, the science behind it, right, is that when you have these thoughts, a feeling gets attached to it. And that's how your brain is able to sort it out in, what the movie shows, like the islands.
Yeah.
Then it knows where to go. And so, what happens is like when we have like a buildup of these, it's our brain floods us with that. And that's when it becomes, super chaotic. And what's kind of like, I like that they describe it's like, it feels very internal, and it almost feels like your blood is boiling and you can't think. And the movie kind of shows this is why you can't think. And there's an actual reason. And it kind of takes away that stigma of like, I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, why can't I control this? Well, the movie shows why you can't control it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was great. So yeah, the movie starts off, the emotions are helping Riley navigate her championship hockey game.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joy has a suppression machine that suppresses memories.
Yeah.
And I'm like, of course, I'm just like, well, there's no way this could go poorly, right? So it's kind of like setting up something's not going to go well. But again, another concept that I wasn't really thinking about when I was a kid, but something you think about when you get older, like more painful memories that you just kind of lock away and don't really think about. And Joy is essentially suppressing any non-joy memories, which
Right.
I felt like, the lesson in the first movie was that the other emotions are just as important and helpful as joy. And so I felt like she was really repeating a mistake she made in the past.
Yeah. And it's kind of just like repeating, our brain's job is to make us feel good. That's its number one job, is to make us feel comfortable and to feel good. So if anything doesn't feel right, our brain will do whatever it has to get us to feel right. So with this movie, right, she suppresses that, and nothing's ever dealt with because it's too yucky and it's too uncomfortable. And so, but what happens is like it builds and builds and builds, as opposed to just being willing to sit in the uncomfortable.
So they have the puberty. I watched the first one like 2 days before I watched this one, just because I haven't seen it a million. I've seen it before, but not 100 times as I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
So I remember the puberty button shows up at the end of the first one, and then that's kind of what kicks off this movie. So yeah, so your son's not going through puberty yet, so he can obviously feel some of these emotions that are in this movie. But did you kind of explain to him? Did you have that talk with him?
Not with him, but like with my daughter, right? And different, as like she's getting older, and she's developmentally at the point where she's like realizing, I'm one gender, there's another gender, and things like that. But
sorry, your daughter's 7, your son's 3.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
And so, but even just having those kind of, talking about emotions, talking about, hormone imbalance, like, with my 7-year-old, not so much. I would say with clients, like that's actually been a bigger thing of like, parents have come and been like, oh my gosh, my teenager is like going crazy. Is it just hormones? I'm like, that's like a big element to it. Like, but there's also these other things where their emotions just take over, and it's like they're flying off the handle.
Yeah.
Which to a certain degree, we want to give them the tools so that way they can at least identify what's happening to them and then figure out what's going on from there. But when you add in the element of hormones, like it becomes a little hard.
So yeah, so do you feel it's obviously a simplification? I get that, but do you feel like it's doing a good job of showing you the additional emotions that come into play when you start to go through puberty?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I think what I really liked and appreciated was they brought anxiety in as like a just an additional, and then anxiety kind of became the villain a little bit. But then it really shows like anxiety's job is to protect you. Like anxiety's job is not to like make your life harder or anything like that. Like, and so it's trying to do its job. But the problem is when we don't understand that that's what it's doing and we make this bad thing, then it starts to play into your self-belief, right? Of like, if I'm having anxiety, I'm a bad person because I'd be able to control this, as opposed to like, no, it's just doing its job. I have to figure out the tools to be able to rein it in.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I really enjoyed the character arc of anxiety in this one, which we'll get into. But the puberty button goes off. Joy throws down the suppressor, and the little construction guys come in and they start messing with the console and
just wreaking havoc.
Yeah, and I like that the console became like super sensitive, right? So like the emotions were doing things they normally did, and it was like an overreaction. The anger was overreacting, and sadness was overreacting to everything. So that was a really good kind of visual way to understand how those feelings arise.
Yeah.
Um, so Riley is going to like a camp, a hockey camp. I did
Mhm.
like the part showing like disgust, really picking up on the social cues. That was something I didn't really get into as much in the first one, but she like was like hyper aware of the way her friend was behaving, and her friend was doing the same, and like she knew something was up, because that's true. Like you have these like very subtle, like almost inklings when you're
Mhm.
interacting with somebody, that and you can kind of pick up a vibe that's just so not explicit, and it was that did a really good job of introducing that concept, I thought.
Yeah, and that's even something that when I work with families, right? It's when I parents like, they're saying everything's fine, but their body language is not saying everything's fine, and their kids can
Right.
pick up on that, can pick up on those subtleties and pick up.
Yeah.
And so it's like, instead of saying everything's fine and suppressing it, it's almost better to be like, actually, like, I'm not okay. Like, and I want to explain that, like, it has nothing to do with you. I'm stressed at work. I have a lot of things on my plate. Like,
Yeah.
so because kids can't, and I really love that it showed like the insides of all their little brains and how everybody has the same emotions, but how they handle it is very different.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the same thing happens with adults, right? Like, how often is when somebody in a partnership, like, it's fine, but it's not really fine, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
classic. It's classic. um. So yeah. So she finds out her friends are going to a different school. And then we have something that I really related to, because she's like trying to play it cool, trying to fit in with like some kid, like the cool kids.
The cool kids,
And
yeah.
I was actually I moved to a new school in sophomore year of high school, so I kind of related to Riley a bit on that one. But I think again they're doing such a good job of just introducing um, just like these like universal feelings. Like, I think this movie's going to age really well, because it's just, there's just like universal things that we all experience at some point.
Yeah. And that's why even though it's like a kid's movie, I mean, almost every adult I've talked to is like, wow, I've never felt so seen in like a
Yeah.
Disney movie.
No,
Like,
that was my exact reaction. Like, I was like, I don't even need my daughter to watch this. Like, this is for me. This is enough for me. Look, uh, and then and then we get the new characters. So we have anxiety. We've talked about envy, embarrassment, ennui. Wait,
yeah.
so are you like using the word ennui with your kids, or are you just calling it boredom?
So my daughter really likes to say ennui because like it's cool to her, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
okay, like
Yeah,
the actual name's boredom, but that's fine if like that's what we want to run with. Like it's no big deal.
yeah, yeah. I thought that was an interesting choice to do, but they explained that it means boredom in the movie, at least.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think nostalgia like comes out, and they're like,
I
no, no,
love
no,
that
like
part.
we're
Yeah.
not old enough for that yet.
They did that like three times. I really like that every time, because it's such a funny and true
Mhm.
true thing. Um, so then we get this concept of, hey, new emotions, they can be annoying at first, but every emotion is good for Riley. That's sort of the lesson of the first movie, right? And so we're hopeful that these emotions will do well. Anxiety anxiety has that interesting arc, because at the very first, it's like maybe anxiety is going to be able to really help her, right? Protect her from some scary stuff she can't see, prepare
Yeah,
for the future, like consider how things could go wrong. So
yeah.
we get this idea that she might be able to help, which
Hmm.
obviously doesn't devolves from there.
Right.
No phones for this entire camp, by the way. Like, I feel like that was a big investment for an eighth grader to have no cell
Yeah.
phone for the weekend.
Well, and what was interesting is they took the cell phone away, and embarrassment was the one that came in, like of like, oh no, like I did something wrong,
Right,
and
right.
that's where that fine line comes in of instead of I made a mistake, it's I'm the mistake. Like I
Right.
wouldn't have not ruined anybody's weekend if I had just done this, this, and this. And I think that's even where that sense of self starts to shift. And I think
Yeah.
it's so subtle that people and teenagers and parents don't even realize it's happening, but it does. And when they put the memory in the lake and it now forms into the sense of self, it can make a huge impact.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this movie does not waste a single like scene of relatability. Like, everything that they're showing is like things that really happen to us,
Hmm.
And so it was pretty cool. But yeah, so anxiety has this elaborate plan for how to get in with the cool kids. Again, I could totally relate to that. And
I
it
think we
seems
can all
like,
relate to that.
yeah,
Like,
and it seems like it might work, right? Like, okay, like sometimes that's like I'm definitely like an overthinker and an overplanner, but like I tell my wife sometimes, like, sometimes it helps to actually like think
it
through this
does.
really really deeply, right? So I think that you could come up with an elaborate plan and it could play out well for you.
Yeah, and that's its goal is to like help us to kind of navigate like different scenarios.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you'll go into like the scenario scene, but like
Yeah.
it can end up being a hindrance as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So anxiety, I guess, decides that Riley's life requires more sophisticated emotions than joy now. And
Hmm.
so they decide to kidnap the old emotions and kick them out. And they also send this sense of self that they had created to the back of the mind.
Right, because there's a
So
new one that's supposed to be
it's
more helpful.
right. So they're gonna make this new sense of self. Yeah. So I mean, how do you talk to kids about a sense of self?
So when I'm working with little guys, like I think, it is kind of the idea of like, who do you think you are? Like, do you think like you're a good person, who just like made a mistake? And, especially when kids come in with like behavioral issues, right? It is kind of this like, well, I think I'm good, but I act out all the time and mom and dad get frustrated with me all the time. And
Hmm.
so that's where bringing the parents in of like reminding them like they're a good kid who had a bad moment.
Hmm.
Their behavior is a way for them to tell you what's going on. Their emotions are whoever's in charge is trying to tell you this is what's wrong with me. It's not actually who they are as a kid, and like just reinforcing that like you are a good kid who had a bad moment and like we can always fix bad moments.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's again such a amazing concept to introduce to kids. This idea of a sense of self and what it means for your behaviors and how it's formed. Like, I really like that. Um, so we go into the suppressed area,
Yeah.
and again, just like so relatable. Like Riley still likes
Hmm.
Bluefy. And I had a younger sister, so I remember like watching, you know, Blue's Clues with her and like SpongeBob SquarePants when I was a little bit older. I was still enjoying it. So again, I really felt like they nailed it with just what goes on in a developing mind. You know, she has the crush on that one character, and then the deep dark secret,
Yeah.
which correct
And
me if I'm wrong, but never pays off at the end, right? I don't remember like you never get back to it.
they never really talk about it. And it is interesting that they don't, but I also am like, I think like that's so relatable to all of us and especially kids of like, and teenagers, like, I feel like I have to keep this deep, dark secret and
Yeah,
because I don't know what's going to happen.
yeah,
And so, yeah.
yeah. So one of my favorite parts of this is Joyce, thinking about how to get back, and she's like, "I'm just going to tell anxiety, don't worry about it so much anymore." And anxiety will say, "Oh wow, thanks, I never thought of that." Like I just like again, so relatable and such
Yeah.
a clear. I mean, this is the most memeable thing on the internet, right? Of people saying like, "Oh, like thanks for telling me. I never thought that to do that." But it's so true. And when somebody else is dealing, when my wife is dealing with anxiety, like I'll say that to her and vice versa. And it's like, it's true, right? Like, don't worry about it so much, but it's so not helpful and so not, and it's so evident that something you already had considered, right?
Right. And that's even like when, working with parents, right? It's, they're telling their kids, like, like, it's not that big of a deal. Just calm down. It's like, they they would love to just do that. We would all
Yeah.
love to just be able to calm down. But it's literally that part of their brain that could even rationalize and help calm them down is like literally gone. It's like they have exited the building and it's more
Yeah.
about like containment and how do I make you feel safe right now as opposed to, you know, um, just calming down. A lot of times with parents, it's when my kid is acting out and having these behaviors, you have a 16-month-old, so right when they're like screaming and you're just like, oh my gosh, my insides are melting right now. It's my brain says, you have to stop because you're the thing causing me distress, as opposed to how do I take care of myself right now and regulate myself so that way I can come in and help you.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's great. That's a great gem right there. But what else do you recommend to parents when they, when they say that their kids dealing with anxiety and they're not sure what to do?
I think a really big thing is kids want to feel seen and understood. They want to know that you get it. They want to know that you can relate to it. They want to know that they're not crazy and that what they're experiencing is real. So that's a big thing I preach to parents, is a big thing I tell my kids, like, I believe you. Do I care that the cup is pink? no, but like you do. Like, and to you, that's a really big deal because there's been things in my life that are a really big deal. Like,
Mhm.
but to you, you don't care about like, because it's not, we're not on the same page, but I see you and I see that this is important to you.
Yeah.
And you can only have the pink cup today because the blue cup's in the washer, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Like, it's that validation piece of like,
Yeah.
I feel seen, I feel understood.
Which again applies to adult life as well, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think any partner wants that from their spouse to just
100%.
acknowledge
Yeah.
what they're feeling before you try to kind of fix it or correct it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so anxiety's fully taking control now. She's got Riley up early practicing. The new emotions are like ready to totally abandon her old childhood friends, and the
Mm-hmm.
old emotions are headed to the back of the mind to retrieve the sense of self. I really like the first one did a great job of this too, of like all these concepts coming to life in animation, right? Like there was the brainstorm, the stream of consciousness,
Yeah.
the train of thought was in the first one. Like it's just such a well done like personification of these things.
Yeah. And that's why, I with clients, I'm like, you guys, you just have to go, this is your homework, you have to go watch it because it gives that visual of like, this is what's happening in your brain. This is happening inside your body. This is, so that way it's linking everything together. So that way, when you're having anxiety, when you're having really bad behavioral moments, like we know what's really actually going on.
Yeah. Um, which movie do you think is better?
Ooh,
How many times do you think you've seen both?
I've probably
Like
seen both.
countless.
Countless. I mean, it's it's always on our house. I always joke like, how do my daughter will say things like she'll be like, I'm feeling this, and I'm like, tell everyone your mom's a therapist without telling everyone your mom's a therapist.
Right.
Like, I really think the first one is such a good, just kind of like it shows like the foundations of, and that's actually how I kind of explain trauma is like, we have headquarters, and what happens is when a traumatic event's happening, that part of your brain shuts off. And so what happens when it kicks back online is it's like, oh no, here's all these marbles. I don't know where to put them though, because that part got shut off. So we're just going to keep them up here. So that's why it's almost like when people kind of explain like they're reliving this over and over again, I'm like, well, you are, because it never got sorted where it was
Mm-hmm.
supposed to go. So right now it's not a memory, it's you're currently living it. But then I think the second movie kind of really does a good job of explaining how your brain's ultimate goal is to protect you, but that until you can kind of recognize, I'm not in imminent danger and I don't have to have 87 scenarios, because when you have scenarios, your brain doesn't understand it's a scenario. It thinks you're living it.
Mm-hmm.
It thinks you're living your worst case scenario, and being able to say like, no, like, how do I have the tools to equip me in the here and now versus planning for the future?
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. So okay, so you mentioned this before, but the animation, the imagination scene, and the
Yes.
projection scene.
Yes. To me, that
So
was so good because I think I think she had like 80 something scenarios like running. And then Joy comes in and is like, well, what if, let me throw a wrench in here. What if everything works out fine?
yeah, and
And
anxiety is like not finding those helpful, which
no.
which I can relate to it. Like when you're dealing with somebody who's stressed, right, and you offer some of these positive scenarios, they find it like patronizing, or it can come across as just like not understanding.
Yeah.
So again, like really so true. Like your anxiety just does not appreciate the positive options that exist as well.
Right. Because positive options doesn't plan for bad things happening.
Mm-hmm.
Positive options don't allow for you to have an exit strategy 87 ways.
Yeah. So the relationship to anxiety and joy in that way is, do you like anxiety is there to protect you from what can go wrong, but then does it, like, is it threatened by positive thoughts and positive emotions?
You could say threatened. I think the hard part is the brain often is very it likes this or that, black or white. Where like my job is I come in and it's like, well, they can coexist at the same time.
Yeah.
You can have them both live together in this like middle ground gray area. But our brain's like, that doesn't make sense. Like, it's either we have anxiety or we have joy. And it's like, well, you can be anxious and have joy at the same time.
Right. Well, the first one did a good job of that at the end because they had that memory that was like happy and sad.
Yeah. And I think though, as like, and so as like we get older, right? And it's kind of like real world concepts where it's like what's the saying? Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Hmm.
It's kind of like that, where it's like, it's either we're super anxious or like we're super joyful, but like they can't live in the same sphere, which
Right.
is not true, but it's just hard to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So Joy kind of convinces those little guys that anxiety is just using them, and
Mhm.
she kind of wins that little battle. So anxiety essentially is getting painted as the villain, right, of the movie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we have embarrassment starting to secretly help sadness in the control center. Thought that was
Yeah.
interesting as well. So then when Riley sneaks into the coach's office, sees the notebook about how the coach says she might not be ready yet, and then the emotions are all freaking out, of course.
Right.
So now we're basically like, oh, I wanted to say this also. This was like a little too real, but at one point, Joyce says, "I don't know how to stop anxiety. Maybe this is what happens when you grow up. You feel less joy." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Damn, we can't be doing that in movies, man."
We're like, all right, Disney, like, thank
Yeah, I
you
was like,
so
"All right,
much.
yeah." It was fun for a minute here, but now you're getting personal.
Yeah.
But
But I think
again,
it's
yeah, like
true.
really
Yeah.
set. So like yeah, so like when your 7-year-old is watching that part, I guess like do you not want them to see that kind of like not hear that kind of content? Like
You know what though? I think you could take it one two ways, because part of me is like, I don't ever want you to lose that joy when you grow up. And so like I want you to know like it is possible, but like you have control throughout your whole childhood, throughout all your teenage years, that you can change that. You can
mhm,
break that cycle. You can
yeah,
choose that I'm going to be a happy person, and like, I can coexist with anxiety and I can coexist with joy as well. Like the two can live together. So to
yeah,
me, I'm very much like, it's a hard, you got to kind of find the balance, right? But I'm very much like, talk about the hard topics when they're little, because then you can keep reinforcing and talking about it as they get older and older and older, so that way they're able to do those kind of things.
yeah, yeah. I like that. Um, so yeah, so anxiety also is introducing this new sense of self to Riley, but it's that she's not good enough, right? Again, very real, hard hitting concept, but important to see, and I think that they do a great job of helping you understand where those feelings might come from and how you're not necessarily. I think we've been talking about this, but like identifying with your feelings is like probably one of the biggest things you should work to not do, right? Especially as an adult or as a kid. And I feel like this movie really helps you to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a space of being able to say like, I'm feeling this. And when the moment you say I feel, your brain kind of kicks back on. So it's like, oh, we're just experiencing feelings. It's not who we actually
Right.
are.
Yeah.
And I think that, out of, hundreds of clients I've worked with, right? Like that negative core belief is the thing that kind of stems everything. It kind of really is like the thing that, it's why, people will either overdo things or kind of overextend themselves, because it's like, this feels so yucky, so if I overcompensate I won't feel this, or they like, this feels so terrible, I'm going to go the other way and I just can't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So then that it kind of all climaxes with anxiety. She's like, got her acting crazy during the game. She's like fouling her friends and hogging the ball, and then she has like a full anxiety attack. Right, she's in the penalty box. Riley is, and you see anxiety creating this little tornado, and
Yeah.
none of the other emotions can do anything. Which again, very very, that's how it goes, right? You're kind of hijacked by this feeling, and none of your other emotions can really kick in to slow it down or stop it. And so they're showing that,
Yeah.
and then Joy kind of has this realization that she was trying to curate Riley's memories, and similarly, anxiety is just trying to protect Riley, but they don't get to choose. These emotions don't get to choose who Riley is, right? They kind of have to like let her be who she is.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's that moment right there was such a good distinction. What kind of how we're saying, right? Of like your emotions are not who you are. They're a part of you. They're a part that makes life good and experiences and grief and things like that. But like that is not who you actually are. And I think, I appreciate like the moment that when anxiety starts crying, realizing, oh no, like I've gone too far. Like this was not my plan at
Right.
all. I was
Yeah.
just trying to keep her safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the anxiety attack stops, and then she has this new sense of self with these more complex feelings, like which are more realistic, right? Of like, I'm brave and I'm scared. I'm a good friend. I'm a bad friend. Just sort of these, again, like not fixed, just not defining who you are at all times, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like a big line that I use with every client is like, our goal is to not fix your emotions. Our goal is to learn how to make them more manageable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, um I'm a pretty avid meditator. I went to like a meditation teacher training course a long time ago, and a big concept in meditation is not trying to get rid of your thoughts, right? That's not the goal of it. I think a lot of people meditate and then they are like, oh, well, I'm not good at it because I had all these thoughts. But you're not
Mhm.
trying to get rid of them. You're just trying to change your relationship to them.
Yeah, exactly. And have a healthy balance with them as opposed to this kind of all or nothing. Either I'm experiencing everything or I experience nothing.
Right. And that takes me to one thing I want to point out was, so she has this like new sense of self. She centers herself. She does like a little deep breathing exercise
Hmm.
and kind of apologize to her friends. I would have loved to have seen some sort of mindfulness character or some kind of like, they have all these other and stream of consciousness and all these other things. I would have loved to have seen some sort of like mindfulness brought to life, even if it
Yeah.
wasn't an emotion, it was just something in the brain that they showed, because I mean, it's such a big topic now, right? It would have been cool to see them slip that in there.
Yeah. I think too. And like, like I appreciate that like she was like like doing deep breathing, especially working with kids and teenagers. I tell parents like they're not going to do that. Like they're not going to
Mhm.
do that. So like you have to find something that will help calm them down because they're in fight or flight. They can't tell to you, they look like a bear. So they can't tell the difference. And
Yeah.
so it's, a good thing. And that's why I even try and tell parents is like, I love that they show the panic attack because a lot of times I'm like, that's a behavior. That's like when your kid is losing their everlasting mind. It's like because of the behavior, but here's what's internally happening for them. So it's like, how do I get their emotions to calm down first, and then I can go in and I can redirect them.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think a little animation would have been helpful there, but the movie did so many good things. I can't
I know one wrong thing. It's
one
okay.
wrong. And I'll allow it otherwise. Yeah, but then Joy kind of comes forward again to kind of help Riley out, and then ends on a real banger of a point too, where she tells anxiety, none of the things you're worried about are happening right now. Focus on what you can't control, right? It's kind of like the takeaway there. So that to me is the biggest, like, I don't know about antidote, but just a big facet of having anxiety is you worry about so many things and most of them never come true. And
Right.
so I think that keeping that in mind can really help alleviate some of those symptoms.
And I think, even with my 7-year-old, like she will talk about like that she's nervous that somebody will laugh at her. And I'm like, that hasn't happened yet. Like if she like messes up in class or something like that. And it's talking about like, remember like our anxiety is like trying to almost like anxiety and embarrassment are like trying to like help you out, but like they're not really being helpful because it hasn't happened yet. Or even
Yeah.
it was like a past situation, she's worried it's gonna happen again. It's like, but that hasn't happened. So like we have to remember to be present and we have to be in the here and now, which is even for which is crazy that like a 7-year-old is worrying about that, but that's really the kind of time that we're in is like even kids as young as first graders are like worrying about future things.
Yeah. So that's something else I wanted to talk to you about. Like, I don't even think anxiety it was a word, obviously, but there was no, people were just not talking about anxiety in my circles when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right.
Yeah.
Do you think, well, I think it's clear anxiety is higher now. And why do you think that there is more anxiety in younger kids? Is part of it just the definition of it, or what do you think is going on that seems to be higher levels of anxiety in our kids?
I mean, there's so many different factors, but I do think, right, like even, as parents, right, like you're like, I want the best for my kids. Like I want all this stuff. So like, you have to do all these things, right? So I think there might be like an unspoken pressure that's happening with parents. A big thing I work with parents on too is sometimes we unconsciously place our value on our kids. So like if you're not behaving well, I'm a bad parent and I can't tolerate that. So you have to make sure you have everything in line, as opposed to we can handle any situation that comes into play. I think also with teenagers, like honestly, social media, like you see all these things, you see all these people doing all these things, we've even had to shut down, YouTube at our house because it's like, I want to, I'm comparing myself to these kids and I'm like, we have no idea what the situation is. And like, we're just not going to even entertain that idea anymore.
Yeah. I mean, social media for sure. Do you think that you brought up an interesting point? Do you think our parents' generation was less concerned with how good of a parent they were, and that's why they gave us less anxiety about that kind of stuff?
Oh, I don't know because when I work with parents on breaking cycles, I think the work it was there, but it was you like if it's like I'm presenting anxiety to like my parent, it was I don't care, shove it down, shove
Hmm.
it down. But you have to be a good student, you have to be a good worker, you cannot misbehave, you cannot speak against me, you cannot disrespect me,
Yeah.
right? Like and that's a lot of what my clients deal with is like this. Well, when I was younger, I wasn't allowed to like voice my opinion. When I was younger, I wasn't allowed to say, I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling worried. It was, no, you're not. You're just a kid. Don't
Yeah.
worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
shove it deep down. And so now it's like, we're the generation of like trying to break those cycles of, no, I want you to tell me how you're feeling because I want to help you walk through it and deal with it.
Yeah. Do you think you can talk about your feelings too much or be too aware of them?
I think it depends. I think it's a balance. I think it's good, like, once again, like kids can pick up on things. So I think letting them know I'm experiencing feelings. I may not go into a lot of the time. I'm not going to go into depth about like the reason behind why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, but I'm
Hmm.
giving you an awareness like I'm feeling overwhelmed because mom has a lot of work things she's got to get done
Yeah.
and like leave it at that. Or like mom's really stressed out. We have a lot to get done. And, I'm sorry for taking it out on you, but I would love to have you help me so that way we can work together as a team.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So then Riley kind of becomes this more like well-rounded person. She has a more kind of complex and integrated sense of self. I think I guess at the end she makes the team. We're not really clear, but do you think she makes the team at the end? I guess that was like a little cliffhanger.
It was a little cliffhanger. She smiles. So I'm like assuming yes, but then I'm like, I don't know. Maybe they're like setting it up for like Inside Out 3.
Yeah, are there talks of Inside Out 3 already?
I don't know. I hope there is. And I hope it's like showing relationships, like not just
I
like
was going to ask you, what would you want to see next? Like, what do you think? What do you think's the next evolution?
I would say relationships. I know at the end or in the first movie, it was they just very like quickly did it of like the mom and dad and their emotions and
Hmm.
how it was interesting that mom's lead emotion was sadness and dad's lead emotion was anger.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, they do a good job of showing that the parents had those same emotions behind the scenes. Obviously, the first one, the parents didn't have the other ones, even though they should have.
Yeah.
But I would like to see. I would like to see the relationship with Riley. Maybe she's in high school, and because that's something else they don't really teach you about, right? They don't teach kids about like heartbreak and just navigating like your own personal romantic relationship. So I would be then it's like, okay, clearly this isn't for kids anymore, I guess. But I would love to see them tap. I guess for me, because I got so much value out of this one. I'd love them to help me with my relationship now next.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that'd be curious. I'd be curious to see how they bring that to life.
Yeah. And even just kind of explain the dynamics of like, because like you said, like it's not talked about. It's kind of like you just like people are like, just get in a relationship. And you're like, great. Well, I've got my own stuff and you've got your own stuff. And now all of our stuff's being, chaotic. And like, how do I, once again, like, how do I manage myself? How do I manage you?
Yeah. I mean, especially when you're like 16, 17, 18, you're not like coming to the table with like, hey, like I'm aware of like my baggage in this, right? No one's doing that. So yeah, I like to see that. All right. So just a couple other thoughts I had. Like, what would you say was one of your like most realistic or relatable moments?
I think probably one of like my relatable moments is like when she is having the panic attack, right? It's like when you are like physically feeling the symptoms and you start to like question yourself of like, what is wrong with me? What is happening with me? Like, I'm not okay. I'm getting really hot. My heart's racing. And so I think that and just, actually seeing like what is going on. And it's kind of like, okay, like it's almost normalizing it. It's normalizing like it's okay to be experiencing that because your feelings and body are doing what they think they should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, everything with anxiety I found really realistic and relatable. I really like the part about still liking the cartoon character. Like that kind of, as someone that still watches cartoons sometimes, that really got me too. Um, so as somebody that works a lot with kids, it, is this accurate to the experience of a 13-year-old? Like the perfectionism and the being hard on yourself. Is it something that maybe manifests itself more in young girls than in young guys at that age?
I think it once again, it depends. Like, and I've also seen too, right? Like, sometimes that unspoken pressure that gets put on of like I have to play sports and I have to attain good grades and I have to be social and I have to do all these things. There's all these expectations because it kind of, and that even goes back to the point of this worrying is I almost feel like there's this pressure of like we put on kids of like you have to be a good adult, like, which is very far down the road and you can't do that unless you do these things. But like when
Yeah,
I worked with high schoolers, it is so insane to me when I hear their schedules and then they're like have crippling anxiety. And I'm like, I mean, you've been going
like duh, yeah,
like 16 hours. Like
yeah.
like that doesn't shock me at all. But they're like, but I have to get into a good school because if I don't get into a good school, like my parents aren't going to love and appreciate me. And you're like,
Hmm.
whoa, like
Yeah.
we got to bring mom and dad in then because, that's not a way to be thinking and living life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's so fun. Again, I'd be curious to see like here, like what are those the same pressures previous generations put on their kids? I mean, my mom's parents definitely weren't pressing her to get good grades and go to college. So like maybe that helped a little bit. I don't know. Um, what was your favorite scene?
I love the very end when anxiety starts to kind of get a little like, oh no. And then Joy's like, okay, what do we need right now? And then she like gets in the massage chair and then they give her like anxiety. um, because it's showing like we can meet the needs. So it's saying like, I'm not trying to get rid of you, but how can I help support you right now? And so even
Yeah.
with my 7-year-old, we've talked about what is your anxiety need? What is your sadness need? And she actually has been like, my sadness needs a cloud pillow. So we'll go get a pillow and we'll like squeeze the pillow together. And it's like, okay,
Mm.
that's okay. And or what and I think showing that, when you take a second, it's like, okay, hold on, my anxiety is going. What does it need right now? Okay, it needs this. All right, let me go take care of that first.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like everything with anxiety really nailed it. Like, I would love to have like seen like the writers like kind of like putting this together because like it just speaks to how universal these experiences are because they're just like there's like 4 or 5 different aspects of having anxiety that they just really crushed from a relatability aspect. So, I'm curious. I wonder like what they threw at the wall that didn't stick, right? Like, I wonder what the discussion of this character was like. And I also really like the nostalgia joke. I thought that was pretty funny.
I mean, it wouldn't be a Disney thing without like a few fun quirks in it. And
Yeah,
so, but yeah, I think it's, I think it would have also been interesting to see like how the different emotions would have like not just need the massage chair or like it's not universal. Like every kind of emotion needs like something different, but
yeah,
they could probably only put so much in.
absolutely. Best life lesson.
Best life lesson. I'm assuming you mean like from the movie, like the best life lesson from the movie.
Yeah,
Um,
or if you have another one, feel free to share.
or
But
in life.
I meant from the movie.
Um, I think the best life lesson is that like everything is gonna. I know it kind of sounds cliche, but it's like everything is gonna be okay.
Yeah,
I think when our emotions take over, it's that fear of like, this is my life, this is forever, I will always feel this way. And it's that hope of like, no, everything, we can fix this. Everything is
Yeah.
fixable. Everything's going to be okay. We will work through this. We will get through this. And I think that's the hope I have for myself. And that's the hope I always present to clients of like, this is all fixable. Like, we just have to navigate this and we have to figure out like how we're going to manage things.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I felt similar. Like just telling anxiety, none of the things you're worried about are happening right now. I think was to me like a huge life moment.
Yeah. Just being in the here and now.
So, what was your final answer? Which movie's better?
I'm gonna go with the second one. I think
Okay.
and this is probably like I would say this as an adult standpoint. I think the second one because it is. I really feel like Disney was like, yeah, we'll make it for kids. Is really for adults.
Yeah,
Like,
no, a million percent. This movie is not for kids. I'm just gonna say it, and I don't care because I loved it.
I think the first one is definitely a good foundation for kids, and it just kind
Yes.
of like helps, you know. But I'm like the second one, I think because I can relate to it significantly more. I'm like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
go with the second one.
Yeah. I mean, the first one, like the most complicated concept they introduce is just that like you can kind of feel two emotions at once, and like it's okay to have other emotions, which I think
Mhm.
again is a incredible lesson for kids and one that's graspable. But this
Yeah.
one to me is like, I feel like the more life you've lived, the more this movie like is helpful to you.
Well, and even her being 13, like, you know, 13's not old in like the grand scheme of things, but you're like, came up with the idea of like, I'm gonna sneak into the coach's office and like I have to know the answer to these things. And you're like, yeah, like kids, I think about like these kind of like complex concepts of like, if
Yeah.
I don't make the team, I am gonna fail high school. If I fail high school, I'm never gonna get to college. And if I never get into college, like you're just like, whoa, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I would go with the second one too, but it was great. I love them both. I'm really glad that you chose this movie to discuss and I got to watch it. Well, Chelsea, this has been a lot of fun. Where can people go to connect with you, learn more about you, anything that you'd like to share or promote?
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is Mind and Heart Therapist. That's where I hang out a lot. My handle is the same on TikTok. I'm there a little bit more, but definitely more on Instagram. And then my website and everything is on there as well on my Instagram link.
Okay. I'll link to that in the show notes. Chelsea Clifton, ladies and gentlemen. Chelsea, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.